final day at the Horizon Mountain Lodge. The promised 3 days had passed. The final morning at the Horizon Mountain Lodge had arrived. The civil servant woke up in his bed. It wasn't a pleasant morning. Something about the situation had felt off for a while now, like a carefully laid plan slowly unraveling. To make matters worse, the assignment itself hadn't been one he was eager to take on in the first place. Still, the job wasn't done yet. He donned his prepared work uniform, strapped on his gear, picked up his tools, and stepped out of his room. What awaited him outside wasn't a welcome sight. The first-floor living room was soaked in blood. It looked as though someone had created a pentagram offering with blood, placing severed body parts at each point. On the lone, clean sofa lay a woman, unconscious. It was the wife from the couple. The agent hesitated briefly, but ultimately resolved to carry out his duties as planned. He knew all too well the risks of acting on personal judgment. They weren't exactly the kind of people worth saving. The woman woke abruptly and screamed at the sight before her. A tall man, clad in a black, waterproof raincoat, stood before her, holding a butcher knife over 35 centimeters long. The man sighed deeply. She had to wake up now. He was exhausted. More than usual. How could things have gone so wildly off course? The agent's mind flashed back to the first day at the lodge. His initial target had been one of the couple. Greedy and vulnerable, they were an easy mark. According to the Disaster Management Bureau's analysis, eliminating one half of a couple first would effectively sow fear, making the subsequent tasks easier. Following the script embedded in his mind, he had planned to lure the target to the kitchen and bring the frame's ominous prophecy to life. I'll burn that person in the stove, but someone had beaten him to it. The stove already contained a corpse, and not just any corpse. It had been left in a bizarrely grotesque state. His mind swam with confusion. The Disaster Management Bureau had ensured that he would be assigned the role of the serial killer, pre-assigning him the cassette tape as part of the disaster's framework. So how could there be another killer? At the time, he had dismissed it as the unpredictable nature of supernatural catastrophes. That was, until lunchtime, when he stumbled upon the shredded remains of 2 students in the backyard. He had no choice but to quietly stow away the large hammer he had prepared in his wardrobe. By then, he had realized the truth. Someone else had been preemptively killing the victims. And now, on the final day, someone had even gone so far as to set up this elaborate dismemberment scene. His head throbbed from the sheer absurdity of it all. Still, his tasks hadn't changed. Despite the chaos, he had to complete his duties step by step. That was the Bureau's way. His recollections came to an end as he looked down at his next victim. The woman's eyes were wide with fear, but she was too paralyzed to resist. He sighed, feeling the weight of his exhaustion, and raised the knife. A voice interrupted him. He turned to see someone leaning casually against the second-floor railing, looking down at the living room. It was the office worker, the seller he had met through Salmon Market. You don't have to kill her. Kim Soleum looked down at him. This individual will firmly believe that they are inheriting the legendary murderer's legacy and undergo mental and physical transformation. In every way, the agent fit the description of a disaster-appointed serial killer. The black raincoat, the gleaming butcher knife. His appearance screamed, killer. But Kim Soleum knew better. Despite how he looks, he's someone you could reason with. Are you certain, friend? Agents from the Disaster Management Bureau come prepared for these kinds of scenarios. For instance, like the holster barely visible beneath that civil servant's raincoat.
Dark Exploration Records, Supernatural Disaster Management Bureau. A black holster-shaped equipment-type item. When equipped, it grants resistance to supernatural mental disturbances of hollow-sanctioned level or lower. Usage condition. Must be a grade 8 or higher official of the Supernatural Disaster Management Bureau.
It was mental defense equipment. They wouldn't send agents unarmed into a disaster capable of transforming someone into a brainwashed serial killer. No way they'd send them in with a clear head. Agents were regularly deployed into high-risk, supernatural disasters where death was often an assumed outcome. Imagine running into a devious pharmaceutical rep using items like smiley stickers for manipulation. Kim Soleum observed the agent standing silently before him and spoke. You really don't need to kill anyone. All the groundwork has already been laid.
I've already done everything. Are you saying you've killed them?
Well, It was true that this disaster wouldn't end without a series of murders. According to if no killings occurred even through external intervention, things would spiral into chaos during the inheritance fight, ending in mutual slaughter. That's why the disaster is designed for the agent to kill directly. To ensure the agent doesn't die by accident, they're designated as the serial killer and managed accordingly. That was the rule. Commit serial murders, or
I just made it look like they died.
convince everyone that they did.
But there were corpses.
That's true, but they weren't my doing. Did you know this lodge has a basement?
Kim Soleum recalled part of the poem inside the golden frame. It wasn't just foreshadowing murder methods. There were other hints as well.
Boing, boing, the sound of hopping with laughter. The wooden floors beneath go bam, bam.
This stanza hinted at something. A sound beneath the wooden floor, an echo from a hollow space below. That verse alluding murder to food. The table is bountiful, something abundant, possibly related to the serial killings.
In the basement, there's a collection of preserved body parts and organs on display. Apparently, this lodge has seen serial killings before. I nearly fainted when I saw it.
Honestly, he nearly did. The sight of those grotesque artifacts from past killings was horrifying. But more importantly, Kim Soleum had found a new use for those bizarre props.
All the bodies we've seen so far,
Kim Soleum grinned awkwardly.
not one of them was intact, right?
That's why Baek Deok-soo had to be the first victim. I couldn't have done it without help. Handling preserved body parts to recreate murder scenes in the dead of night was a task so revolting it made him want to give up on life altogether. But Baek Deok-soo, faced with a binary choice between collaboration or death, begrudgingly became an excellent assistant for Kim Soleum's morbid creativity. Together, they painstakingly staged the crime scenes. They placed charred legs into the stove, using Baek Deok-soo's sneakers to complete the illusion. The ground meat and bones in the backyard, repurposed food items from a freezer behind the storage shed with bits of clothing scattered for effect, and the current bloody mess in the living room? The same method. Although Kim Soleum had done all the actual abducting alone, aided by the unique abilities of his plush companion, Braun.
People were hidden away while we staged their deaths. Using real body parts meant no one suspected anything. I figured the real killer might get flustered and stay quiet if I acted first.
The plan was as much a psychological play as it was an improvisation in the face of chaos.
You know, someone still ended up killing people, though. The allergy and the landslide, for example.
Both happened before Kim Soleum had a chance to intervene. The landslide might be written off as a supernatural catastrophe, but the allergy, that couldn't have been mere coincidence. No one, not even Sherlock Holmes, could figure out someone's fatal allergies just by observing them for less than a day. Even I only learned about it by accident during a conversation. So the idea that someone brought an allergen, like peanuts, into the lodge in advance specifically for murder was even more implausible. Someone had to have known the profiles of everyone coming here ahead of time and prepared for the killings accordingly.
Was it you, Agent, who caused the allergic shock?
The agent didn't deny it. He wasn't shocked in the slightest. Shouldn't he feel some sympathy for the loss of innocent lives? Well, they weren't exactly innocent. The government doesn't just pick random people for Russian roulette-style sacrifices. The Supernatural Disaster Management Bureau uses a method known as the Scales of Malice to determine candidates for compulsory civilian conscription. The scales weigh against acts of motiveless murder, and anyone with a heavier weight of guilt than that is classified as eligible for conscription. In other words, only those deemed to have committed atrocities worse than indiscriminate killing are selected and sent into these disasters. If the disaster has to operate periodically, they choose people who deserve to die anyway. At least it's an attempt at ethical balance. A very government-like decision, maintaining a veneer of morality. So this time, too, they're all probably people who fit that profile. And Kim Soleum's guess was spot on. The married couple turned out to be an adulterous pair. The actual spouse of one of them, along with their young child, had succumbed to despair and financial hardship, leading to a family suicide. The college students had been perpetrators in a bullying case that resulted in a classmate's death. They'd been indicted but acquitted due to lack of evidence and had since gone on to join the same hiking club. As for the designated driver, he was an as-yet uncaptured child predator. Even without knowing these details, Kim Soleum had a general sense. A dream lineup, I'm sure. Clearly, the government had orchestrated things to ensure the tapes ended up in the hands of these individuals, and they sent an agent to monitor and manage it all. That person was standing in front of Kim Soleum now. The agent spoke, his voice steady.
They're all criminals. Everyone in this lodge, if the law worked as intended, would be sentenced to death in some countries for crimes of such egregious severity. Everyone except you, who doesn't have a tape.
But inwardly, the agent wasn't confident this explanation would land. His prior encounters with civilians during missions hadn't gone particularly well. Wearily, he raised his gaze.
I see. That makes sense.
Surprisingly, the office worker standing on the second floor nodded easily.
Anyway, aside from those two, the rest of the group is alive and well, so that's good.
Kim Soleum spoke casually, as if the situation were no big deal.
Even for criminals, killing them must weigh on you. This isn't a bad outcome, all things considered.
Who exactly are you?
This man had gone out of his way to stage fake murder scenes, appeared unfazed by the agent's suspicious appearance, and even trusted him based on rational deductions. No ordinary person could maintain such composure. Kim Soleum let out a deep sigh.
I'm just someone who tends to get swept up in these situations. Are you affiliated with the Disaster Management Bureau? Not at all. I've heard rumors, though. It's fascinating to meet an actual agent in person. Ah.
He suddenly turned his head. The back door to the kitchen was opening, just like on the first day.
It seems the lodge caretaker has returned.
The ending scene of this disaster was approaching. The mountain lodge was a mess, a pentagram drawn in blood, and dismembered body parts strewn across the living room. In this macabre scene stood the civil servant, holding a butcher's knife before a fainted woman. From the second-floor railing, I watched it all. If I didn't know it was fake, I myself might have fainted at such a grotesque sight. But the lodge caretaker, who entered through the back door, was polite as ever.
Did you have a comfortable stay?
As if that were possible. Still, there was no point in wasting energy responding, so I simply stayed silent. The caretaker didn't waste time on clichés like, "I stayed out of your way so you could rest undisturbed."
3 days have passed. The time has come. You may now exchange the cassette tapes for the inheritance of this lodge.
No one has died up to this point, though. This is where chaos erupts, where people start killing each other. The accumulated fear and trauma must reach a peak before the cassette tapes will release their survivors. That's why I made sure to create it. The fear and trauma, that is. Modern sensibilities didn't make it any less distasteful, but I'd scared them enough to believe they were really dying. It seemed my efforts had paid off. The caretaker recited his lines, and the fact that the living room was still peaceful, without bloodshed, proved it. Of course, this peace wouldn't last. The caretaker's first approach was toward the fainted wife on the sofa.
Would you like to exchange your cassette tape?
What? Huh?
The woman woke up screaming, stumbled a few times, and bolted out of the lodge. She would have been better off staying unconscious. Unbothered, the caretaker turned and addressed the next person.
Would you like to exchange your cassette tape?
The civil servant stared at the caretaker for a moment before speaking slowly.
I'll reveal my decision last.
Understood. In that case,
The caretaker turned to the final person. Despite his tattered clothing, his speech carried the refined cadence of Seoul's old aristocracy.
would you like to exchange your cassette tape?
I've worked like a deckhand on a shrimp boat for the past 3 days to get to this point. Entrants are promised significant monetary rewards if they stay within the disaster for a designated period. This was why I had gone so far as to play the role of a serial killer. I retrieved the cassette tapes from a backpack belonging to the deceased college student. Even Baek Deok-soo's tape.
6 tapes. You are guaranteed first priority for the exchange. You may now claim ownership of this lodge, sir. Would you like to?
As the caretaker spoke, his tone momentarily revealed his excitement before reverting to politeness. If an entrant chooses to inherit the place of disaster, Horizon Mountain Lodge, as their reward, their altered psyche would become permanently tied to it. Even if my serial killing was a ruse, there was no need to risk taking on such a burden. But I can't just make a random exchange or refuse outright either. Whether you exchange the tapes for gold, garbage, nothing at all, or even burn the lodge to the ground, the cycle restarts. When the next round comes, the serial killer's items are redistributed, drawing new victims to this very place. The lodge would reappear as if nothing had happened, perpetuating the carnage. I'm pretty sure if I make the exchange, the people I pretended to kill and hid will all actually die. There was this record.
Personnel, 8 conscripts, 1 civil servant, grade 8. The civil servant was successfully designated as the serial killer but deviated during the 3rd murder, using a special item instead of the provided poison. Attempted to conclude the disaster without killing conscripts by inducing near-death states. Outcome: 1 civil servant survived, refused the exchange. The conscript in a near-death state was later confirmed to have died after choking on vomit post-exchange.
The idea of locking everyone up so they couldn't escape during a fire, conveniently preventing their survival? That's how I'd end up a genuine serial killer. Even if these people were destined to die in this cursed tale, it would still feel wrong. Let me respect my humanity, however fragile it may be. After much consideration, I made my choice.
I want to exchange 1 cassette tape for the employment contract of the lodge caretaker.
The caretaker seemed momentarily stunned.
My employment contract?
The Supernatural Disaster Management Bureau typically aims to eliminate curses. The insane pharmaceutical company I work for aims to ensure employees escape while deftly preserving and managing phenomena. It's never about actually resolving anything. For Daydream Inc., these ghost stories might serve as raw material supply sources, but for the government, they're just catastrophes to be dealt with. This difference has even inspired some creative reinterpretations in the wiki. In short, government-managed phenomena can successfully disappear. The lodge caretaker announces the contract period has ended with this exchange. The location of the lodge becomes an empty lot, with no signs of paranormal activity to date. This is the official conclusion of the last recorded investigation into this phenomenon. A definitive end. Why not terminate it before the next cycle even begins? That's how I arrived at this.
I assume your current employment contract is tied to the previous lodge owner. I'd like to transfer that contract to myself.
Not taking the lodge itself, but inheriting the caretaker's employment rights and terminating his contract. If I could replicate the scenario in the official records, this disaster could finally conclude. I waited for the caretaker's response, and
It is theoretically possible. However, with all due respect, the employer must meet certain qualifications.
I waited for the caretaker's response, and
It is theoretically possible. However, with all due respect, the employer must meet certain qualifications.
the caretaker's formal tone carried a faint, fleeting trace of arrogance.
There must be inherent existential nobility.
For the person running a murder lodge, it seems the ethics of this role are vastly out of sync with modern sensibilities.
Ha! The caretaker is acting like an 18th century butler, mistaking his master's authority for his own! Why not just take over the lodge and fire them?
Braun, I'm going out of my way not to do exactly that.
Your patience is admirable, Mr. Roe, dear!
I idly scratched my chin. Actually, something did come to mind. It's true that I didn't bring much in terms of items, but I always carry one small thing in my pocket. The latest trinket from the merch box, the Silver Heart. A small silver badge that enhances one's persuasiveness when worn by a kind individual. It's a good opportunity to test it too. I had carefully handled the tiny badge in my pocket, using a pair of tweezers to affix it to the fabric. The other party showed no particular reaction. Maybe it's an issue of application range. He probably isn't human. The wearer earns the reverence of others proportional to their cumulative altruistic actions. Well, I had doubts about the definition of nobility anyway, so this was just a test. I quickly adjusted my approach.
Are you saying I lack innate existential nobility?
I had no choice but to start talking.
Finding someone who meets such criteria is certainly difficult. I hope you won't feel disheartened, sir.
No, that's not the issue. What's important is this. Are you saying the exchange is difficult because I don't meet the qualifications?
I don't quite understand that.
I deliberately furrowed my brows, like a customer filing a complaint.
The condition was, bring the cassette tape, and I'll exchange it for anything I possess. Correct? Suddenly changing the terms at the end is disconcerting.
I sighed dramatically as if weary.
3 days. That's how much time I've spent here. And now, at the last moment, you're introducing qualifications that contradict the promise.
The caretaker seemed slightly flustered.
There seems to be some misunderstanding.
What kind of misunderstanding?
The promise remains intact. However, if you inherit only my employment authority, it may be challenging to exercise that authority in practice.
The caretaker kindly elaborated.
If you were to inherit the lodge itself, I would continue to work here under the original contract. But inheriting employment authority means that right would only be usable when applicable.
In simpler terms. Sure, I'll keep working under my old contract, but I won't take your orders.
So, it's just a symbolic contract without practical application. Is that what you're saying? That's fine with me. So, as long as I'm aware of these terms, the exchange can proceed, right? If I still wish to proceed knowing this, there's no reason to stop me, correct?
If that's the case.
The caretaker extended both hands.
You are correct, dear guest. Please place the cassette tapes you wish to exchange.
I quickly handed over the tapes I was holding. 6 tapes left my hand and landed in the caretaker's rough palms. The caretaker smoothly tucked the tapes into the folds of his worn clothing. Then, after adjusting his tattered attire with deliberate precision, he produced a thin, ancient-looking object. It was a piece of paper. It looked like traditional Korean hanji paper, yet curiously Western in its cutting and design. Rolled up and sealed with red wax.
This is the original contract document.
The moment I took it, the old paper caught fire. The hanji began burning in a vivid orange hue, disintegrating into embers that rose into the air. Then they coiled around my wrist, specifically the spot where the mascot's tattoo from the theme park remained. The tattoo glowed as if it were heating up. The embers clashed with the tattoo, almost as if they were wrestling with it, before finally yielding and springing away. They then settled slightly higher on my arm, closer to my forearm, aligning themselves vertically. Now I got 2 tattoos. This isn't what I wanted. I had expected to keep the physical contract as an item, but this? It felt oddly binding. But, in terms of portability, this was actually more convenient.
Yunju, or benefactor. Another old-fashioned expression.
Even Braun refrained from making ominous remarks this time. Based on prior experience, the tattoo likely wouldn't be visible to the public. Certainly not to the civil servant standing here. So that worked out fine. If the contract simply vanished into thin air, that was probably better. Not like I'd ever call on him anyway. As expected, the lodge caretaker had vanished as if he had never existed. All that remained was the blood-soaked lodge, a scene straight out of a horror movie, and standing in it, just me and the civil servant. It's all wrapped up now. Amusingly, at that moment, soft light began filtering through the windows. The weather's cleared. Welp, everything's in good order. With the mood set, I could vanish quietly, and the civil servant could go about his business. The unconscious survivors tied up in the basement? The government could handle their identities and clean up the aftermath. Since the creepypasta itself had disappeared, I likely wouldn't end up as a target of investigation or detailed record-keeping. Whether it was the government or a corporation, they usually didn't exert themselves over neatly resolved cases. Even if it's logged as a peculiar case, I didn't actually kill anyone, so it should be fine. I just needed to play my cards right with the civil servant and offer a reasonable explanation. Everything would blow over nicely. The civil servant ascended the stairs and strode toward me. Grabbing my arm, he looked me straight in the eye and asked, quite seriously,
Have you ever considered a career shift? Please think it over carefully.
The civil servant, dressed like a textbook serial killer, spoke with conviction.
It's a guaranteed job until the age of 65 with a grade-based salary system. Since it's a specialized position, there are additional allowances.
Why am I sitting here, listening to what sounds like a job fair spiel from the Supernatural Disaster Management Bureau?
If you're prone to being drawn into supernatural phenomena, Wouldn't it be better to have financial stability and institutional protection?
I already have that, thank you very much. No matter how I look at it, I doubt a grade 8 civil servant earns more than someone working for a major pharmaceutical corporation. Still, there was no way I could blurt out that I worked for Daydream Inc. I absolutely do not want to end up as a person of interest under the Bureau's watch. I was beginning to regret speaking out loud for the sake of faster, more persuasive, and impactful communication. Feeling like I was starting to break out in a cold sweat, I opened my mouth carefully. Since he seemed to think of me as a mere civilian prone to supernatural phenomena, I decided to play into that perception.
This incident was truly terrifying, and I just wanted to do something about it. But I'm not someone capable of resolving supernatural phenomena. Being an agent, that's absolutely impossible.
The civil servant looked at me as if slightly dumbfounded.
You thought the caretaker of the lodge was the cause of this phenomenon, so you terminated the contract to prevent further incidents, correct? Then you independently made a judgment to fully resolve this supernatural phenomenon, did you not? That's an innate talent.
No, it's only because of the And Wiki.
I'm sorry, but I really can't, sir. To be honest, I only did all of this because of the friend who came with me here.
Please, just drop it.
Besides, I'm not skilled enough to fight, or have any special abilities to warrant becoming an agent.
The corners of the civil servant's mouth lifted slightly.
Those can be learned. You'll be taught in detail after you're appointed.
What makes you so confident about this?
You possess a small silver badge shaped like a shield, don't you?
I had considered this possibility, but still feigned, being more startled than I actually was.
What? How did you...
That is a piece of persuasion equipment used by the Disaster Management Bureau. I heard it was once distributed to citizens who performed great deeds, but this is my first time seeing someone able to use it. It can only be used by good people, making it something of a certification tool.
And then he gave me a knowing look.
Did you use it after taking it out of your pocket?
Pretending I don't know would make me look more suspicious. I decided to lean into it. Remember, this only works for good people. As long as I haven't caused any trouble, they won't confiscate it. Thankfully, my brain kicked into overdrive, and a seamless response popped out. With a faintly bittersweet expression, as if there was a story behind it, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small silver badge. I made sure to present it in a way that felt natural, even mentioning the only legal route through which I could have obtained it.
I inherited it from my family.
From today onwards, my merch box is my family.
They said I should use it when I needed a voice in an emergency.
The civil servant nodded, looking at me with a mix of respect and pity.
You must have had an admirable family.
Are you misunderstanding that they're watching over me from the heavens? Well, technically, that's not entirely wrong. I tried not to think about the black merch box floating in the sky and continued speaking.
They told me not to volunteer for dangerous tasks, and I want to keep that promise as much as possible.
That was indeed something my parents said when they tried to dissuade me from entering the financial sector, and it's true I didn't exactly volunteer for this job either. Not a lie. Not a lie. The civil servant looked at me with slight disappointment, but backed off without further insistence.
In that case, it can't be helped.
And thus, the nerve-wracking job fair came to an end, with an unexpected bonus.
If you ever face concerns or issues, feel free to contact me.
As I was leaving the lodge, the civil servant handed me a contact number. This time, though, it was presented in a different format.
This is my work number. The one I just gave you will be more useful than the previous card. The previous one might involve delays in dispatching a response team, and there's no telling which type of agent might show up.
In short, it was a get-out-of-a-creepypasta-free card. I exchanged the previous contact information with this new one as if I were swapping out cassette tapes. I never thought I'd end up with connections. Now, before he'd try to make small talk, I should quickly leave. Though he'd probably do a background check on me anyway. I scratched the back of my head awkwardly, pretending to be a bit embarrassed.
Actually, with our transactions through the salmon market, I was so scared I resorted to written communication. But next time we meet, I'd like to talk. With our voices. And could my identity be kept confidential? It's just that it makes me uncomfortable. And, well, scared.
The civil servant was silent for a moment.
If you leave things as they are now, that should be possible.
Does that mean he'll leave me as an anonymous figure? Perfect. This left room for future dealings. Next time, I'll raise less suspicion and sell more food.
Take care on your way down.
I shook hands with the civil servant, who then rode off on a bicycle. Even his final attempt at persuasion as we parted was brushed off quite smoothly.
Honestly, sir, I'm at my limit with situations. Even now, I feel like I'm barely hanging on. It would be too much for me.
And I truly meant it. Baek Sehyun stopped giving me that creepy, glaring look. The civil servant, apparently just making a polite gesture, nodded and rode off without hesitation, along with their parting advice to leave before the Bureau's cleanup team arrived. A life-saving piece of wisdom. I left the lodge, now bereft of the landslide debris and bus stop as if by magic, and began walking down the mountain trail. Only then did the tension begin to lift.
Over the past few days, sacrificing your sleep and pouring your efforts into creating that artistic final shot, this broad knows how hard you worked! Well done!
Yeah, it was grotesque, terrifying, and utterly exhausting. To think he got sent into such a ghost story alone. This is why I'm not cut out for the Bureau. I couldn't remember a day when Daydream Inc. seemed like a better company than today. At least they pay in cash and points. There's a saying that even servants should work for wealthy families, and this was the perfect example of that. Though I wouldn't say it's particularly rewarding, I glanced back at my colleague, who was equally entangled in this thankless job.
Let's just get out of here. This cursed lodge. Fuck. I got caught up in this nonsense that doesn't even pay in either points or cash. There's something you need to say before we go.
Baek Sehyun clamped his mouth shut. Then, turning to me, he spoke in a highly defensive tone.
I don't think I owe you anything for this, after all. It's not like I begged you to save me.